To what extent could America abolish less popular forms of segregation? That's the question. Segregation is still here in America, even though segregation laws were passed decades ago, protecting it from ever coming back. Many people commit very degrading acts without even thinking about how hurtful it really is. If there were changes made to the government, citizens were more educated on the topic, and people who don't fit into society's standards were celebrated more, America could allow for a new way of viewing cultural minorities, proving that reforming requires devotion. The problem is that no one thinks segregation exists, at least the kind that you think of when you hear that word. When you hear segregation, you think of separated bathrooms or water fountains that only white people could drink from or black people. The article, The Name Negro, explains that Black Americans still to this day are more likely to be in poverty, political inequality, and social segregation for their skin. This is really shocking because the Civil Rights Act was passed July 2nd, 1964. There are still many lingering forms of hatred towards minority groups. The consequences of this problem are that minority cultures face social segregation and stereotypes. The history of racial segregation is known by most people. You think of African Americans and Native Americans. Native Americans were the natural inhabitants of North America. Europeans came, took their land, killed many of their people, and put Native Americans on special land places where only they could go. Many people know of their past, but many don't know of the troubles they still face today. Native Americans still have to deal with many stereotypes, and it's hard for them to leave their land because they feel as if everyone's judging them. People in the 21st century can't let the past go, and that's a big problem because if we want to have a better future for our future generations, we need to make amends with each other. Some people who are part of minority groups are still fighting for their ancestors and the hate that was caused by them. And some people of majority groups are very mean with their words and they tear others down for being different and individual. Segregation has always been a thing in the world. There's always been slavery, poverty, and sexism. America is the land of the free, though, so why don't we start acting like it, by treating everyone equally? The negative effects of segregation are that people who are part of the cultural minority are raised from birth to think that they are not equal to those who are more culturally accepted. This leads to a lot of tension in the country. Overall, America needs to ethically and socially change the way minority groups and majority groups treat each other. If America wants to change the way minority cultures are treated, then the country as a whole needs to change its ways. In America, racial, financial, and gender/sexuality minorities are targeted by the government and majority culture groups, proving that reforming requires devotion. The first solution is to alter the way the government views unpopular cultures. People have realized a pattern in the government and have started to question and protest their actions. Police officers are more likely to patrol a highly criminalized neighborhood compared to one that is typically safe, which leads to more arrests in poor communities. This hurts people born into poverty because if you go to jail while you're already in poverty, it's really hard to break the cycle of poverty. The author of the article, Letters, states, "Until our politicians and electives demonstrate integrity, we the people will gather in large numbers in our writings, organize marches, and calling out wrongs around us. We do need police in highly criminalized areas for the people who live there to protect them and keep them safe. But to ensure equalism, we need to have the same amount of patrol everywhere to give everyone the same opportunity." The second solution is to celebrate what makes people different. The country has thousands of beautiful, different cultures. And instead of protesting for your culture to show its worth, show the country what they're missing if they want to get rid of it. The article, The Name Negro, states, instead of telling those to stop using the word Negro, focus on positive attributes of their race. All minority cultures, too. Focus on what's missing if your culture disappears altogether. Show the country what they would miss. The Gen Z generation is known for their strong want of change. In 20 years, the country will be a whole different place because of their want of equalism and understanding. The article, Letters, states, the USA lies in the hands of young, smart, bilingual, bicultural Mexicano-Americanos. Not only Mexicano-Americanos, Latinos, but every single race and culture group there is. Some believe that the country is stronger if we were all the same culture, but then we wouldn't be a free country anymore if that was the case. It's hard to convince those people that cultures are worth protecting that aren't theirs, but mentally, it's really beneficial for those who've been told their whole life they will never be the same as one that's more accepted socially. The third solution is to teach everyone about segregation and how it's still here in the United States. For example, when people use racial slurs for humor or saying the word gay or the N-word or the R-word for dumb, these are all examples of hatred, and they're heard everywhere on every corner of every city. If people were educated on this topic, maybe there could be a possibility for change. The article The Name Negro states, Barton felt that the terms Negro and the N-word were created by white people in order to make black people feel inferior. So when non-African Americans say the N-word, without thinking, it reminds African Americans of what their ancestors had to go through. Same with using gay or the R-word. It's painful for those who live that lifestyle. It's insulting. Also, some who are not a part of society's standards experience old school segregation, the kind you think about when you hear the word. The article, The Residential Segregation, states this discrimination can take many forms, including differential treatment by mortgage leaders, racial steering, and being subject to stereotyping, as well as physical violence and destruction of property. Most people think that this kind of actions were never seen in present day. Little do they know, minorities experience many of these terrible things multiple times in a lifetime. The article, A Letter to My Nephew, states, you and I know that the country is celebrating 100 years of freedom 100 years too early. People still feel unloved and unappreciated in America for what they're bringing to the table. If the country truly wants to end social awkwardness between minorities and majorities, there needs to be some action taking place soon. America is known for its people to be stubborn, depressed, and lazy. If there was a greater push to accept all in the country, all types of people, then maybe some of these problems would be resolved. If the problem is not fixed soon, the awkward tension between minor and major cultures may not be resolved, and unable to get along, we will never be able to get along like our forefathers intended for us to. Americans need to learn ways of respect, no matter their skin color, age, gender, sexuality, financial position, and many, many more. And that's my citations.
How valid and reliable are the sources you used? How do you know, and which sources didn't work?
So I got a lot of my sources from reliable databases, and if they needed to, I ravened almost all of them because they didn't have that little check mark that said that's like peer reviewed. So not only did I find them on a credible database, but I reviewed them as well.
What advice would you have for other researchers who consider this topic?
I would say ask people who go through it their point of view as well. Ask people who live that daily lifestyle so you can get a first-hand experience of what they go through.